Computer. Is that okay? And again, I'm not very technologically adept, so I'm sorry if there's any technical hitches. If you can use the chat to let me know if you want to communicate anything like that, and we'll have questions and answers at the end. So I'm very grateful again to you for coming, and thank you. Um, there have been some people in my life who have been very inspirational when I've been thinking about liminality. So I just want to quickly credit some people who have really helped to hone my thinking on this. And that's B. Halligan, priestess of Ceridwen and Avalon, who is our tutor on our priestess of Ceridwen training, and Christopher Hughes, the head of the Anglesey Druid Order, of which I'm a member, and Jenna Tellandry as well, or Tellandrew, the Modron of the Sisterhood of Avalon, of which I'm also a member. Dr. Gwilym Morris Baird, who is a fantastic scholar and musician. He's a real bard and lives quite locally here in Wales. Also produces this amazing course of YouTube videos and trainings called Celtic Source. So he's been a real academic source of inspiration for me. So with all of that out of the way, let's start. So when we think about liminality, I'm going to talk first of all about liminal times. Then I'll go on to talk about liminal places. What's the function of liminality, and how can we get ourselves into a liminal state? And then I want to finish at the end by talking about Ceridwen and the story of Ceridwen and how liminality plays a part in that through characters and activities and things that happen in the story. So, for many living creatures, there are particularly dangerous times of the day. So, dawn and dusk, they become more exposed to predators because of the half light. It compromises their ability to see, so their normal senses are limited. So some predators, of course, have adapted to take advantage of this. For example, around here we have owls. Barn owls have exceptional hearing, and they can find their prey just by sound. And although they're mainly nocturnal, barn owls will hunt at dusk and around dawn, especially if they're trying to feed their young. Animals that are active usually during twilight are called crepuscular. So instead of being diurnal, where they're active mainly during daylight, or nocturnal, where they're active mainly during the night, they are crepuscular. And examples of that are bats and jaguars and foxes. So for human beings as well, these are boundary times. So the transition between daylight and nighttime, the point just before dawn and dusk, or as we call it in Scotland, the gloaming, are often viewed as times that require extra vigilance. So our eyesight might not be quite as reliable, and our other senses are heightened. And these are times when strange occurrences are more likely. So midnight, or the witching hour, and noon are also liminal points because they're neither the evening nor the morning, or neither the morning nor the afternoon, but in between. In terms of the moon's cycle, the sixth night of the moon, so 6 nights after the dark of the moon, is also regarded as a special time. So Pliny the Elder, in book 16 of his Natural History in the 1st century of the Common Era, describes the famous mistletoe rite, often associated with the winter solstice. So what he said was, and I'm going to quote, the mistletoe is gathered with much ceremony, and above all on the 6th day of the moon, by which these men reckon the beginnings of their months and years, and of their cycle of 30 years, because the moon has then sufficient power, yet has not reached half its size. Mistletoe itself is thought of as a liminal plant. It grows in the boughs of trees. It's not rooted in the earth, but neither is it fully of the sky. It's suspended between the two, and when it is cut for ritual purposes, it's really important that it doesn't touch the ground. So it's often caught in white sheets, or it's taken and suspended from a staff so that it can be carried to the place of ritual without touching the ground. So the berries of mistletoe are seen as holding potential for new life. They contain a white, sticky, milky substance, which is like semen. So I'll talk more about thresholds later, but since we're talking about mistletoe, I'll mention that there has been a practice for many centuries of hanging mistletoe above doorways. There's something special about leaving one space and entering a new space. It involves us looking back and also looking forward, like the images of the Roman god Janus, with his two faces simultaneously looking in both directions. He was the Roman god of thresholds and doorways, exits, entrances, and transitions. It's important to pause at this point, to take time, to ponder, to take stock before you launch into the new. And in the Wheel of the Year, there are particular points which are thought to be liminal, the points where a season moves from one into the next. The ancient Celts celebrated 4 major fire festivals at Imbolc, spring, Beltane, summer, and Lunasa, the first harvest, and of course at Samhain, at the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter. In their book Halloween, Mark Doody and Christopher Hughes have a good quote. So I'm just going to read, this is the book I'm talking about. Still available and in print. It's called Halloween, the quintessential British guide to treats and frights. I'll put lots of links in afterwards in the event listing of any books I mention, or also YouTube videos. I've got some good YouTube videos to share as well if people want to find out more about this stuff. But in this book, they're talking about Samhain. So they say a continuous theme can be observed throughout the pagan, Christian, and the ordinary world, and it is that of the dead. Although the Samhain or Halloween celebrations do not in any shape or form revere death itself, it's focused instead on those who have passed beyond the veil and into the world beyond. However, the Celts believed that on the eve of Samhain, the veils or the doors between our world and the world of the dead were thin and would not hold fast the dead, and thus allow them entry into our world. Now, this could be a blessing or a curse, depending on who the dead were. A departed parent or sibling might be welcomed back amongst the living, but a rival chieftain or an evildoer would not. Supernatural forces and the powers of dying and decay were most prevalent during this time, and the Celts genuinely believed that the spirits of the dead wandered amongst the living. But where does all of this come from? One probable explanation is that Samhain, just like our modern Halloween, was and is a liminal time. Liminality is a word used to describe something that is betwixt and between. We continue to this day to be affected by liminal time and space, whether we are conscious of it or not. So the Welsh celebrated Samhain as Nos Calan Gaeaf, or Ysbryd Nos, Night of the Spirits, where the spirits are abroad. During our lives, there are also liminal moments, not just birth and death, but also at the point of orgasm, the petit mort. And we go through transitions from, for example, childhood state via the teenage years to our adult state. And the menopause can also be considered a liminal state. So I'm going to turn now from liminal times to talk about liminal places, boundary places or thresholds. And firstly, I'm going to look through the sort of visor of land, and then look through sea, and then through sky. So the Celtic otherworld, or Anuvan, isn't the same as Christian ideas of heaven and hell. It's not separated from this world by a one-way street, which you can only get to when you die. And although Anuvan is a place of rest before reincarnation, a supernatural world and the dwelling place of gods and goddesses, and the ancestors, our worlds overlap in various places and in various ways. The word Anuvan means the very deep. So in the first branch of the Mabinogi, Pwyll meets Arawn, who is king and god of Anuvan, in the woods, and he agrees to go with him, to follow him to Anuvan. And Arawn takes him there by guiding him deeper into the forest. And this is a metaphor for us going deeper within ourselves. So Anuvan is accessible by going deep, whether in the forest, underground, over the sea, across lakes, etc. Anuvan is about deepening our own existence, and Anuvan is the original source of Awen, the enigmatic force of divine inspiration. So there's many places of entry to Anuvan, pools of energy, portals to the other world, and we might seek them out, or we might stumble across them and inadvertently end up crossing over, which is slightly more worrying. Hills, especially hollow hills or man-made mounds, can be one route. So Iron Age hill forts, stone circles, barrows or burial mounds, fairy forts, places like Silbury Hill. Also, crossroads, not just because gallows used to be erected at crossroads, but because of the symbology of the crossroad as a place where you have to make a decision which road to follow next. Hedges, stiles, and other sort of territorial boundaries. And then we come to caves. So whether they're natural caves or man-made, they're not above ground, but they're also not beneath it fully. And in Cornwall, you've got these amazing examples of fougous or souterrains, which are votive holes that have been created by people in the ground. And it's suggested that these man-made tunnels or passageways into the ground may have been associated with rites of passage. So the initiate will go into the passage, and it's so dark in there that their senses are disturbed. They may have been on hallucinogens, we don't know. But there's steps that they have to step over, or in places they'll have to duck because the roof comes down deliberately. They may have to crawl at places along the journey. And that experience of going into the earth in that very difficult way heightened the experience that they were having in transition, and then they would re-emerge afterwards as though being born again. Certain plants are also associated with liminality, so seaweed and mistletoe, as we mentioned, and yew and hawthorn and willow. So I'm going to read a poem now, which I wrote about willow. I think some of you may have heard it before. Sally's just put, before I do that, Sally's put a note, thank you. You have, where she lives, she has a mess of boundaries and styles. So I've lost the thing, which have been left in place. And she says she gets a massive surge of energy whenever she comes to one and has the urge to climb over it, even though very often that's not now possible. And it's interesting to hear you talk about styles as liminal places. Yes, and often in meditations, we end up entering the other state in the meditation by crossing a boundary or a style or opening a gate. So here's the poem, Willow. Gallows wood, coffin weaver, the fearful whisper behind their furtive hands. They quake to hear you cracking, creaking, snapping your jaws to catch them fast in a weeping without end. Yet, tree of the poets, your wood births harps. Divining rods from your branches guide the true seeker as your tenacious roots quest to discover hidden water. Your gift of charcoal draws my daughter's visions. Her hand moves across the paper as your fronds caress the stream. The weaver makes baskets for apples and cradles for babes. Perfectly balanced, you stand between the worlds, between two best beloveds, patient water lapping you, delivering the kisses of your lunar lover on rippling reflections. Watchful willow, you wait between the worlds, holding the key to unlock the unseen. Did you learn your healing arts from the whispering of elves, or did you once hold a place in the court of Anuvan? I bring my secret sorrows, my hidden joys. You bend your back, leaning down to catch the confidences, rocking me in your leafy embrace. You sing of highs and lows, of ebbs and flows, of endless new beginnings. Thanks. So, moving from the land onto sea or water, entrances and portals to the other world can include the shoreline, which of course is neither land nor sea, wells. So in Culhwch and Olwen, the story, there's a well that features prominently in that, springs, and of course lakes. So I'm sure you're familiar with the archaeological evidence of offerings being made by the ancestors, throwing things into lakes. For example, the treasures that were found in Llyn Cerrig Bach on Ynys Môn or Anglesey. And there's crannogs, which I absolutely love, which are roundhouses built above lakes on wooden platforms that rest on stilts and are accessed by wooden suspended walkways. And there was a fantastic example of a crannog, a reconstruction on Loch Tay, which sadly burned down recently, but they're building a new one there. So if you get a chance when they've rebuilt the crannog to go and visit it, it's really fantastic experience. And they're still carrying on doing lots of reenactment and things in the meantime, storytelling, until they get the crannog rebuilt. Around Glastonbury and Mere, there would have been lake villages that would have been connected by wooden walkways, and travel by boat would have been possible. There's a large number of Welsh myths and legends surrounding lakes. For example, the story of Llyn Fach, which lies on the northern margin of the Black Mountains in Carmarthenshire. So the legend of the Lady of Llyn Fach tells us about an otherworldly woman who is incredibly beautiful, and she comes out of the lake one day and is seen by a man who's out minding his livestock, who falls in love with her, and she agrees that she'll come ashore and marry him, provided that he will promise not to strike her 3 times. And of course, over the course of the tale, he does strike her the 3 times, and she goes back into the lake. But it's said, however, that she returns from time to time, and she instructed her sons in her arts, and her sons went on to be the famous physicians of Mothervai, and a number of their medical formulae remain in Welsh manuscripts that we can see and access to this day. And islands are also really important in connection with the other world. Irish and Welsh legends are often involve journeys across water to reach islands. So the island of Avalon, islands such as Ynys Enlli or Bardsey Island, became places of pilgrimage. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. Right, drink. Sorry. So they're places where the dead are buried or are taken to for healing. And King Arthur is either thought to be resting in a cave or to have been taken to Avalon. Ceridwen, it was said, lived in a castle either on or under the lake of Llyn Tegid. And Arianrhod, in the 4th branch of the Mabinogi, lives on an island. The water provides a separation from the mainland. Right, I'm going to mute and cough. Bear with me a sec. It's tickling. Sorry. And then we come to one of my favourite bits, mist and fog, which are really important in any discussion about liminality. So mist is water, but it's suspended in air. So a bit like the mistletoe, it's not one thing or another. And there's magical mists which abound in myth. For example, again in the Mabinogi, the mist that descends on the land in the third branch when Manawydan, Rhiannon, Pryderi, and Cigfa are under their enchantment. So I'm going to just read you a little quote now. Bear with me a sec. So I'm going to read you a quote by John O'Donoghue. And I'll put a link in afterwards to it if you want to see any more. So he says, at any time you can ask yourself, at which threshold am I now standing? At this time in my life, what am I leaving? Where am I about to enter? What is preventing me from crossing my next threshold? What gift would enable me to do it? A threshold is not a simple boundary. It's a frontier that divides two different territories, rhythms, atmospheres. Indeed, it's a lovely testimony to the fullness and integrity of an experience or a stage of life that it intensifies towards the end into a real frontier that cannot be crossed without the heart being passionately engaged and woken up. At this threshold, a great complexity of emotion comes alive: confusion, fear, excitement, sadness, hope. This is one of the reasons such vital crossings were always clothed in ritual. It is wise in your own life to be able to recognize and acknowledge the key thresholds, to take your time, to feel all the varieties of presence that accrue there, to listen inward with complete attention until you hear the inner voice calling you forward. The time has come to cross. So there's a story called Geraint Vab Erbyn, and in the story there appears a huge hedge of mists. And I'm going to read you a little bit now from about mists, which is from Gwilym Morris Baird. So this is not the quote now, I'm just prefacing it. He has a YouTube video about enchanted mists where he looks at 3 different romances and how mists play a part in that. So in the one I'm talking about, Geraint Vab Erbyn, Geraint goes through a symbolic death and is resurrected from the dead. He realizes that Enid, his love, does love him, but he needs to go through a final adventure in order to have this final transformation that will make him stand in his sovereign self and be worthy of marrying her. So what Gwilym Morris Baird discusses in his video is the purpose of the mist. Death is often associated with the hedge of mist, and there's a broader narrative about enchanted mist, which is a repetitive motif. He talks about the third branch of the Mabinogi, which I mentioned earlier, which is where Manawydan and Rhiannon end up in this enchanted mist. And the quote that he has for that from the Mabinogi, I'll just read out. So that night, it says, after the first sitting while the servants were eating, they got up and went out, and the 4 of them proceeded to Gorsedd Arberth, and many people with them. And as they were sitting there, they heard a tumultuous noise, and with the intensity of the noise there fell a blanket of mist, so that they could not see each other. And after the mist everywhere became bright. When they looked to where they had once seen the flocks and herds and dwelling places, they could see nothing at all, neither the building nor beast, neither smoke nor fire, neither men nor dwelling place. So the mist in the third branch of the Mabinogi is an enchantment placed over Dyfed. And this is connected, the literal meaning for that mist is revenge. So the supernatural, otherworldly powers of Anuvan want to avenge a wrong done, perhaps to one of their own in the first branch by Pwyll and Rhiannon. And what the mist does is mark a change in the destiny of the main characters. So it's the same in Geraint Fab Erbyn. The mist almost becomes a character in the story. It's a mysterious force. In real mist or fog, of course, we're aware that sound plays funny tricks, sound changes, light changes, forms move around in the middle distance. You can have optical illusions, it can be eerie, and it's easy to lose your way and to get lost. So Geraint has to pass through various different types of mist in his story, and the function of that mist is that every time he undergoes a challenge, he grows and betters himself. At the beginning of the story, he lacks humility, lacks self-knowledge and understanding, wisdom, and he has to gain these things by passing through these various types of mist. Okay. So the function of liminal spaces is about transportation from one realm into the next, or one state of being into the next. It's a rite of passage, facing challenges, making choices, facing up to your fears, and taking that leap to leave all that was behind and grow and transition into your next stage, a necessary step for attaining sovereignty. I feel I'm a bit quote heavy, but I'm going to read you one more quote just now, and then I'll sing you a song, I promise. So in literature, in stories, I've got a quote here about the purpose of liminality, which is really worth sharing. It's by somebody called Joe Bunting, and I'll put the link in afterwards. Okay. So in terms of literature, liminality is the in-between moments, the space between an inciting incident in a story and the protagonist's resolution. It's often a period of discomfort, of waiting, of transformation. Your character's old habits, beliefs, and even personal identity disintegrates. He or she has the chance to become something completely new. Every story must have a protagonist that changes, and change happens through the liminal space, this middle time of transformation. Liminality is destructive. Transformation always requires death of the old person so they can become something new. Liminality is chaotic. When a person enters liminal space, their old value system is destroyed, causing them to be disorientated, like with the mist. They need a new value system to live by, and the experimentation that they undertake to discover that value system is always uncomfortable and full of failure. The status quo will be destroyed to make room for something new. Liminality is the place of transformation, and this is what liminality is all about, learning to live with tension and pain and even the boredom of waiting. The middle of every great novel is about developing character. It's where your protagonist decides what kind of person he or she is going to be. Liminal places teach us to let go, to relax, and be changed. And the question implicit in this is, for our characters and for ourselves, can you be content in the midst of tension? Can you find your equilibrium in a chaotic world? Can you persevere through pain and boredom and be changed? If your protagonist or yourself fails to change, then there's a real danger that they might become stuck forever, unable to move forward to the next state. And I'm going to sing you a song now about somebody that happened to. So this song is called Crazy Man Michael. Within the fire and out upon the sea, Crazy Man Michael was walking. He met with a raven with eyes black as coals, and shortly they fell to talking. Your future, I will tell to thee. Your future, you often have asked me. Your true love will die by your own right hand, and crazy man Michael will cursed be. While Michael he ranted, and Michael he raved, and he beat at the four winds with his fists so. He laughed and he cried, he shouted and he swore, for his mad mind had trapped him with a kiss so. You speak with an evil, you speak with a hate, you speak for the devil that haunts me. For is she not the fairest in all the broad lands? Your sorcerer's words are to taunt me. He took out his dagger of fire and of steel, and he struck down the raven through the heart. Oh, the bird fluttered long, and the sky it did spin, and the cold earth did wonder and start. Oh, oh, where is the raven that I struck down dead? That he here did lie on the ground. Oh, I see but my true love with a wound so red, where her lover's heart it did pound. Oh, lo, lo, oh, da 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 dee da dee da 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 dee la da dee da dee dee. Crazy man Michael, he wanders a route, and he talks to the night and the day. Oh, but his eyes they are sane, and his speech it is plain, and he longs to be far away. Oh, Michael he whistles the simplest of tunes, and begs of the wild wolves their pardon, for his true love is flown into every flower grown, and he must be keeper of the garden. So poor old crazy man Michael is stuck in a sort of limbo where he can't bear to move on to the next stage because he would have to leave behind his love, who he inadvertently killed. So he's forever going to wander and be lost in liminality. So, what tools do we use if we want to access liminality? Well, there are many, and any of us who engage in magical practice will be familiar with Dion Fortune's concept of magic as the art of changing consciousness at will. So when we create sacred space and cast our circle, we're preparing to step into liminal space, into the betwixt and between. People in different cultures all over the world have used different techniques to access that altered state. So, drumming, meditation, trance, dancing, chanting, using cards, dark mirrors. When we talk about stepping into our priestess self, in some cultures, also alcohol, we hear lots of mentions of mead, and intoxication is one way of moving from one way of being into another. And then there are psychonauts, who are people who experiment with their own personal thresholds, using, for example, hallucinogens, psilocybins, fly agaric, and other things that can help to move them from one state to another. These are all tools, keys to open doorways and to allow us to move from one state to another. In paganism, we've also got the hearth and or the altar, which can be seen as liminal spaces that bridge the gap between the mundane and the supernatural. So liminal dreaming happens between the state of being awake and being asleep. In liminal dreaming, you're dreaming while you're awake, so it's not REM dreams or lucid dreaming as such, but free associational, even psychedelic swirling, non-narrative dreaming doesn't tend to have self and others, or like I say, any kind of narrative or story. If you want to find out any more about that, I'll post a link to a YouTube video by someone called Jennifer Dumpert, which is really interesting. It's quite long, but really interesting about liminal dreaming. So I'm going to turn now, having gone through liminal times and liminal places, and tools to access that sort of state. I'm going to turn to talk about Ceridwen and take a little bit of a closer look at liminality in connection with her story. So I'm just going to start with a short quote. Okay. So this is by someone called Deognatos. Deities who are liminal will have certain qualities. Often they may be androgynous, so bridging gaps between genders, zoomorphic, not quite human or animal, or psychopomps, those who can pass through worlds, especially between the living and the other world. And sometimes they may be able to do all of these things at once. Gods of liminality watch over transitions as well. So, thinking about Ceridwen, she's a lady of the lake. As we mentioned earlier, her dwelling is on or in Llyntegid, Lake Bala, which is the largest and deepest glacial lake in Wales. And I'm just going to move to my mind map now to look at things that I've picked up about her story. And I'm sure that you will have thought of things yourself. So I'd love to hear from you afterwards about what you've thought about. So in the story of Ceridwen, there are characters that can be associated with liminality. So even the names of some of the characters. So her son Morfran of Agddi, well, Morfran can mean great crow, but cormorants are also called that. So a cormorant, a sea crow, is a bird associated with liminality, and I don't think that's an accident. And Crerwi, her name can be translated in lots of different ways, as most of these names can be, but precious egg is one translation possible. And of course, an egg is a symbol of potentiality, of potential, which again, it could be connected. We have the character of Morda. So there are often threshold figures that will allow access into liminal states. And Morda is blind, so he exists in a liminal state himself, and has to rely on other senses. Again, that's, I think, interesting. You have Ceridwen herself shape-shifting, and Gwion Bach in the chase sequence, shifting through the elements, through the chase and the different animals that they assume the form of. Ceridwen is known for shape-shifting into Henwen as well, the white sow. So she's definitely associated with turning into animal forms. And of course, the Henwen is a white sow, and white is associated as a colour with the other world. So you get Gwyn ap Nudd, the Lord of the Wild Hunt, and his dogs are white with red ears, etc. So it's white animals are associated with the other world. Then there are three sort of gestational periods, or three turns of perhaps a year and a day, which we can note. So there's the first, which is obviously the cauldron and the stirring of the cauldron for a year and a day. So throughout that year, Ceridwen is collecting herbs and roots and various other things at the correct times of the moon to add to the potion. She had to undergo a journey herself before she could start this brewing of the potion, to meet with the Ferrecht to find the recipe for the brew of Awen. And so she then, for a year and a day, is adding to this potion, which is being tended by Gwion-bach and Morda. Then you have the chase scene, which again takes place, we're not sure of the time frame for the chase scene, but it travels through the wheel of the year and the elements, so could be seen to be a year. When she ingests Gwion-bach in the form of the grain, and then he grows inside her, there's the gestational period of the baby growing in her womb. So that's another gestational period, not quite a year and a day, but quite a long time. And then, of course, there's the time where she puts Taliesin into the ball croin, into the leather bag, and pushes him out into the water. Again, remembering about lakes and water as a liminal space, where he continues to develop inside the ball croin before it's opened by Elphin when he finds him on the weir. So I think within the story there are a number of liminal transitional periods held within the story itself. And of course at Llyn Tegid there are the walking trees, and if you go there you'll see, I don't know if you can see my necklace, maybe not. I've got this wonderful pyrography. It's an image of a tree with the roots of one of the walking trees. And so at the lake, they have these fantastic twisted trees, and all the roots are visible. And there's a legend about them moving at night, these wonderful trees. The cauldron itself is kind of interesting, so I thought I'd just talk about that as well, if for a bit. So it says in the Spoils of Annwn, it talks of Arthur and 3 fullnesses of his ship going into the other world to obtain the cauldron of the chief of Annwn, the quest for the cauldron of the chief of Annwn, which will not boil the food of a coward, and which is kindled by the breath of the 9 maidens. And from it comes poetry and prophecy, and it has pearls around its rim. So cauldrons are really important symbols of potential and transformation. Unfortunately, if dead bodies are put inside the cauldron and they are resurrected, then they can't speak. So it's not a total resurrection. But from Ceridwen's cauldron, of course, the 3 drops of Awen emerge, and then the cauldron splits and the rest of the liquid becomes poison. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. What I'd like to do is give you a quick comfort break, and then I would like to take you on a short guided journey, if that's okay. So if we could say, what time is it now? Yeah, can we have just a couple of minutes comfort break, and when I see you all reappear, I'll start and we'll just do a very short journey. I can't hear you, I'm afraid, Pippa, sorry.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. It's all right. I'm on my phone, Gail, and I don't usually do Zoom on my phone. It's like very different, isn't it? I was just saying, it's fascinating. I'd never thought of it, how you're explaining it. Thank you so much. Really interesting.
I'm at the beginning of thinking about it all, really. So we'll have many years to think about it together.
We look forward to it.
Yay. Okay, so I'm just going to take you on a very short journey now. So sitting comfortably, if you just sort of roll your shoulders a little bit, get rid of any tensions. And then we're just going to take a couple of deep breaths. So we'll take a deep breath together with the land beneath our feet. And another breath with the sky above our heads. And then one with the sea that surrounds our land. And just find yourself a comfortable position where you can be nice and relaxed. And I'll ask Ceridwen, our dark mother, to be with us as we take this short journey, to protect us and to accompany us. Blessed be. So you find yourself in a wooded environment with some nuts on the ground crunching beneath your feet as you walk, and berries on the trees, the hawthorns and the rowans. And you're walking down a path with no obstacles ahead of you. And as you walk on, you're conscious of the little noises of the forest, the sounds of the birds and the animals around you. And you feel completely safe and comfortable. And as you walk further, you become aware that things are getting lighter, that the trees are becoming a bit more sparse. And as you come towards the edge of the forest, you see ahead of you a stile. And to cross over, you climb up the wooden stile easily and without any difficulty. And once you get over the stile, you see waiting to greet you your guardian or your ancestor or your animal guide, whichever appears to take you and to be with you on this journey, to make sure that you're safe and that you're protected. So take a moment just to greet your guardian or your animal guide. And when you've done that, together you begin to walk forwards. And now you see that the landscape is changing. And ahead of you, you can view grey stones, pieces of slate in different shapes, and white quartz sparkling in the sun, and bits of moss and lichens. And there are still a few trees, but they're gnarled and twisted, and their roots stand up proud from the earth as the waters have washed through them many times. And you see a vast lake spreading out before you, a very deep glacial lake, beautiful and still, but very deep. But your journey is not taking you towards the lake. Instead, what you're doing is walking along the side of the lake. So watch the water in your mind for a while and think of a question, something that you've long wanted to find the answer to. And as this question forms itself inside your mind, you notice the lapping of the waves, and the tide is going out. So you continue to watch it as it recedes. More and more of the beach or the shoreline is revealed. And you see the slate fingers of Ceridwen and the sparkling white quartz appearing. And you walk down carefully onto the revealed land. It's still wet and the slate is changing colour as it dries, but it's firm and safe underfoot. And you follow this receding tide line, watching more and more of it be revealed. And as you walk, you study what is being revealed. So spend some time now looking at the shore and at your feet as you go. And as the tide goes out further and further, further than you've seen it go before, you notice something special has been uncovered. Go up to it and see the object. Now, this means something to you, something that can help you to answer your question or to guide you towards the answer. Spend some time now studying it and learning about what has been revealed. If there's something for you to take with you and you feel that that's right, then pick it up and take it with you. Otherwise, acknowledge it and hold the image in your mind. This is a treasure from the depths of Llyn Tegid, from Ceridwen for you. And when you're ready, you can start to walk back across the stones to the path. And when you've got back to the safe place at the top of the shoreline, you walk back along the path with your guardian or your animal spirit with you until you come to the stile once more, where you stop and thank your guide and thank Ceridwen for the experience, and then begin to cross over the stile again, back towards the trees and your way home. So take a few breaths when you're ready and wiggle your fingers and toes and come back to this consciousness and this world and the room that you're sitting in. And when you're ready, if you'd like to open your eyes. Hello. So it was only very short and sweet, but we're slightly over 5 o'clock, so I hope that that's okay to carry on just for another minute. I want to read you another poem that I wrote, which you may have heard before. It's called Night Falls. And then I'll just end on one final quote and then see if we have any chat to have. So, night falls, and I begin again my lonely and involuntary vigil. No softly snoring sleep will come to unknot my belly or to calm my restless spirit, flickering like a moth in a jar. My flesh is hanging heavy, but I drag myself outside, breathing deeply in the dark, feeding on the dank, damp air. The starlight, slight but pure, hints at the vast space above. The earth resolutely pulls me down, promising that final piece of standing stone, of chambered cairn, of the silence before the dawn, when the chill seeps bone deep. I am as still in my solitude as the heron on one leg, endlessly watching at the weir. Even now he sleeps, with head folded under wing, until he sails the morning mists once more. The edges of myself begin to blur, becoming one with the night, pulsing with the heartbeat of the earth. then you are there with me, folding me into your cloak, wrapping me into your mystery. Memories of ancestral fires flicker, warming my blood. Figures dancing, smoke curling, kindling hope in my heart, which rises with the small sparks high into the frozen air. We stand shoulder to shoulder, facing the faint light of dawn. I hear the small sounds of life stirring all around, and know that I too will turn my face towards the sun and welcome in the day. And one final quote just to finish the talk. Okay. So this quote is from Ash, and it's from Patheos. So Ash says, I invite you to bask in whatever kind of liminal space you're currently inhabiting. Some liminal spaces are permanent and others are temporary, but incredible growth can result from both. Do not despair in the darkness, my friends. A caterpillar's greatest transformation materializes in darkness before its eventual emergence as a butterfly. A complete and utter breakdown of all that the caterpillar was before it was a butterfly must occur. Lean into this change and resurface, reconstructed and renewed. So that's the end of the workshop. I was also going to tell you a story about Cantor Gwaelod, but I think I might need to do another video to do that, because it'll probably take at least 15 minutes. So if you'd like to unmute yourselves, I'd love to chat.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Gail.
Thanks for coming along.
Oh, no, not at all. And so many interesting things. And as I said to you before, listening to you is always a joy. Not just the content, but just the listening.
Yes.
You're a tonic and a balm to hear. So thank you for everything I've learned today.
Turn off